Hello, ladies, and welcome back to another episode of Celebrate You. Woohoo! So, today we have an impressive woman with us. So, her name is Tiffany Tong. And, Tiffany, before I go into you, ladies, let me tell you a little bit about Tiffany. Tiffany is A, serial entrepreneur. B, she's based in Nepal building a fintech startup that is properly having real impact in women who need solutions. So I love that about her. And like her co-founder, it's another woman. So it's like a women founded company, which is amazing. And she's a serial entrepreneur. She started her journey in entrepreneurship in 2013. She's worked for the World Bank. She then became a resident advisor for the World Bank. Like their current startup, Aeloi, like they won like Asia Agritech Challenge 2020 grand winner number 1. Like she is like pro. So it's going to be a very interesting episode. So, Tiffany, thank you so much and welcome to the show. How
Thank
are
you
you
so
today?
much, Monica. Very good. Super excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so, let's start with the basics, of course. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yes, for sure. Well, it started a long time ago. When I was a child, I moved to Canada when I was 4. And then when I was 8, I moved back to Hong Kong. So I was born in Hong Kong. And that gave me a lot of perspective in different cultures. And I've been fascinated with different cultures and how different people live in very different ways throughout my life. And I think that's what led me to join an exchange program when I was in university. And it was the first time I went to Norway and I lived there for 6 months. And then I went to Uganda and Tanzania and I lived there for 4 months. And that started my whole journey in international development. And since then, I've been in Africa for about 10 years. And then I moved to Nepal when I met my current co founder.
Cool. I'm like, it's such a diverse story. Uh, it's like I have so many questions in my mind. But given that you just mentioned your co founder, let's start with the foundations. Uh, Why did you start Alloy? And then how did you meet Sonica, your co-founder?
Yeah, for sure. So, alloy, the very seed of the idea of alloy came when I was working in Africa and I was working with data and also agriculture projects. And I just saw many ways that we could make that process more centered on the actual user, the experience of the user, and also using technology, right? Even like technology, but in a very simple way so that everyone can access it. So that was the seed of Alloy. And then when I met my co-founder Sonica, we were at the Singularity University program in Silicon Valley. And it was 4 months. It was super intensive. We were learning about all these exponential technologies and how they were going to change the world. But what really connected the two of us was we were wondering, what is the impact of these technologies on the people that we care the most about, and parts of the world that we care the most about. Um, and then how can we harness these technologies for good, essentially? How do we mitigate those impacts and build a better world together? So that's what really drew us together. And then from there, we had a space to start a small startup. We actually started the first version of Alloy as something very, very different. And then slowly over the
Interesting.
years, we pivoted into Alloy.
Awesome. You know what, like what I love about how you, I guess, like portray yourself? It's like your LinkedIn, it's not, I'm an entrepreneur. And based on what you just said, it's like, it's not an entrepreneur. It's like you're an impact entrepreneur. And I love that. And basically what you just said now, it's like, it's not just using technology, but it's using technology to have impact in people that need it the most.
Absolutely. To be honest, in my first startup, it was back in 2013 in Tanzania. it took me a year before I could call myself an entrepreneur, because growing up, I just never thought about it. I was much more of a social activist. I was much more just trying to understand the world, and I was really into development work, just trying to understand the world that way and see if I can help, right? So the word entrepreneur really, I never grew up with that concept of me being that one day. But then when I was introduced to the concept of social entrepreneurship and how many people are really looking at different ways of using um, the benefits of entrepreneurship to solve social problems, I was really attracted to that. So, yeah, it's been a long journey to change my own mindset, to be honest.
Yes, I was going to ask that. It's like, what was the change in mindset? Because I think many of us have that challenge as well. That it's, oh, am I an entrepreneur? Yes, no, why? What makes an entrepreneur? People think like, oh, yeah, I'm the founder of Facebook. Then I'm an entrepreneur. But that's not the
Yeah.
case.
No, I mean, it's such a wide definition, right? So there's two ways I love in my within myself defining the word entrepreneur, and one is what I read from someone, and it's about someone who just tries to make what they want happen regardless of how many resources they have right now. So they just, they just start essentially, and they see a way that they want to move, and they find ways to get there. And then the second one I thought a lot about, because I'm often asked, what is innovation? What do innovators do? And my definition of that is innovators simply see the world in a different way. And I think we see the world in a particular perspective, and then we try to find the evidence to prove to everyone else that this perspective might just work in making the world better.
I love those two definitions. It's like, yeah, it's like innovation is having a perspective different to what's currently out there. As simple as that.
It is. It's very simple, and I think innovations can be anything, right? You could be just walking along the street, and I often play this game with myself. Actually, I see a shop, and I'm like, "Oh, if I had that shop, what would I sell there? Like how would I improve on currently what they're selling, or anything else? Like I see a playground, and I'm like, oh, what other structures could be here to make it fun for kids? So I think it's really simply that.
Hmm. I love that. You're kind of like improving what's out there and solving problems.
Yeah, basically, or I try.
Oh, yeah. We all do. So tell us a little bit about Aeloi and the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Aeloi, so we are a fintech social enterprise based in Nepal. Our main goal is to help grassroots micro entrepreneurs that are usually in the informal sector access more affordable financing. And the way we do that is we've built this loan insight software. And this software helps make sure that the loans are tracked more, and it's almost like an automatic audit, and therefore it helps to decrease the risk of the loans, and also increase the digital footprints of the borrowers.
And well, you and I and Sonica, we met because you were part of the UNCDF kind of fintech mentoring program, and I was one of the mentors. And one of the things that, so you and I mean, like we had like more in-depth conversations about the work that you do. And one of the things that really caught my attention was your customers, the type of customers that you serve. Because most of the fintechs that people talk about these days, it's like, oh, the big tech for the big millennials. It's like, oh, let's capture this audience and make their financial lives easier. Yes, and that's a very good mission. But the target audience that you're helping, it has a very different profile, and they are in need of solutions like yours.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I think the statistic that really bothers me a lot is there's still 2 billion people in the world that are financially excluded. Essentially, they have no way of accessing any financial services at all. even in today with like apps everywhere, microfinances everywhere. So we have all these innovations in financing, but there's still 2 billion people. Um, and to me, these 2 billion people, and amongst them, there must be brilliant entrepreneurs there that are just not being able to find the financing that they need. And to me, they're also the ones that will serve people around them the best, right? Like they're going to be the entrepreneurs that will provide the services that people around them want and will buy, and will improve their lives. So that's the biggest challenge for us, is trying to make sure that we get financing to that level. And we truly believe it's possible now with technology to scale. Like, if you have to do paperwork, a $50 loan is just too much to handle, right? Like the administration and the monitoring, and the compliance, all of that cost is just too high. But with technology, and if you can build everything automatically, it means that it almost tends towards zero, that cost. So we see a huge opportunity in serving those 2 billion people.
Awesome. Can you describe, like, how does that customer look like? And can you describe like a female persona, just to be more specific?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to start with the female persona,
Yes.
because actually, right now, our company only works with female micro entrepreneurs, and through female only microfinance organizations. And that's very deliberate, because we wanted to design first for female users, because so often fintech is designed with the normal male, stereotype in mind, and then adapted for female users. So to describe them, for example, we work with women farmers. So they might have just taken a beekeeping course, and want to buy the equipment and the bees to help them start their business. And they just needed that investment. So they have the knowledge, they have people around them, especially government extension agents that can go out and teach them how to do this stuff. But they might not have the income proof, because they've never been in formal employment. They might not have any assets such as land or houses, because of how ownership of assets are normally, in some places, owned by males. So they don't have access to these things that they can go to a microfinance place and say, hey, just give me a loan. I know how to do all this. I can grow this business. So those are the customers that we really have in our mind when we're designing our product. And when we're field testing, we're actively making sure that we include a wider range of users.
Awesome. Yes. And I think, like, as you speak, I'm thinking, like, yeah, that's a segment that's not actively thought through in the traditional, let's say, traditional fintechs, because we just focus on millennials. And many times it is conscious or unconscious bias towards sometimes a male persona, or just management team. It tends to be dominantly male. So that also, like, conscious or unconscious bias, it happens.
Absolutely. And we're very aware of that unconscious bias, right? Even within ourselves, like, being very aware of these issues, we have unconscious biases. And that's why our majority of our team is female, our project managers are female, when we go out, we start with these allies in the female focused microfinances, so that we can overcome those unconscious biases. I mean, ultimately, we're trying to design a product that's useful for everyone, right? The 2 billion people. But
Yeah.
to start off, we want to design for the ones that are most marginalized right now. And actually, I think that actually makes us a better product to move forward with the 2 billion. And part of that, a very
Yeah.
simple part, is that we actually could have built an app quite easily, especially my co-founder, she's CTO. She's built apps at the Microsoft Innovation Center in Nepal for a very long time, So, but we made the very deliberate decision to start with SMS, and move into USSD, because this is technology that every single simple feature phone can use. And even if you don't have that, you can borrow a phone and get a SIM card and use it, right? So we just tried to design for the very accessible technology that is available everywhere. At the same
Yeah.
time, we're building our backend with blockchain, so that we're connecting them directly to the latest technologies so that we can build that pipeline. Essentially, I think of it as an on-ramp to a highway. So, it's essentially a highway that's moving forward in financial services into the future. And we need to build that on-ramp for the 2 billion people.
Yeah. Why did you choose Nepal out of all the countries in the world?
That's a very good question. I've actually always been interested in Nepal. When I was in university, I actually wanted to go on exchange there. Unfortunately, they canceled the program before I could go. That's one
Yeah.
thing. So, actually, when I met Sonika, she is from Nepal, in the US. In 2017, I was like, "Oh, I would love to come visit you one day." So that was part of it, but also very strategically, Nepal is I think they call it the Silicon Valley in the Himalayas, essentially. I think there's a lot of tech talent there, and Sonica is very much involved in that sector. That's one thing. And it's also a very, I think the microfinance industry there is very much active. And it's a very, very good place for us to build up our tech and to user test it and to make sure everything's good before we scale it further.
Yes. Are you planning to scale into other markets?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, we recently had a conversation with someone that was very interested in the tech in Mozambique. And then so we might be moving there. We don't know. And there's another contact that potentially could be in Kenya. So there's lots and lots of places for us to figure out places that have the same pain points in relation to financial inclusion, and be able to scale our technology there.
Amazing. And you just used a very important word, financial inclusion. Yes. Can you share with us your thoughts about A, what is it? And then B, how do we tackle the problem?
Absolutely. I mean, financial inclusion is very simply having access to financial services that are suitable for you. And as I mentioned before, 2 billion people in the world do not have this. Um, and I think the way we can tackle it is there's no one silver bullet to me. There's so many different things. People need to get proper IDs. People, as they come more and more online, we need to be able to find ways to parse that data and create alternative credit scores, which lots of people are doing. Um, from Aeloi's angle, how we try to approach this problem is we're saying, well, alternative credit scores and all of that requires a certain level of privilege already, to be honest. Like you might need to have access to data, to mobile data and to a good phone. You might need to also be able to prove your identity, and to even form a microfinance group, and to have collateral and to have like maybe an educational background. So all of that is certain levels of privilege already. And so what we thought is, how can we find a method that we can actually prove someone's entrepreneurial ability and their willingness to be a good entrepreneur just through the actions that they do with the loans. And that is what Aeloi is doing. So essentially, we're a digital loan product. We help microfinances disperse their loans digitally in the form of an SMS sent. And then the borrowers, they take this digital loan and they spend it at an ecosystem of accredited vendors. So, for example, you take a livestock loan and you can only spend it at livestock related vendors,
Yeah.
and which
Yeah.
means we help keep the money within that ecosystem, right?
Yes.
So essentially, what they're doing is they're proving they're a good entrepreneur by following their business plan, buying the inputs they need, and then growing their business that way, and proving that they won't spend the money elsewhere, essentially. So that's our approach to financial inclusion, is we want to find yet another way to increase those data points for these excluded 2 billion, to help them prove that they're good entrepreneurs.
Awesome. I'm like, that is so interesting. And yes, what you said about like having having a credit score, that's like privilege by now. I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about it like that. But yes, there's 2 billion people who don't have anything. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a
Like a
lot of
lot of
people.
that's a lot of people, and many of those people, of course, are going to be women.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. And what's your view on what is the impact on a women's day-to-day life of not having access to financial services?
I think it's very much tied to everything in their everyday life, right? Because there's often not formal employment opportunities in the places that the 2 billion, especially for women, live. So that means they have to create their own jobs. That means
Mm,
that they need capital to create jobs that also suit their demands. So, for example, women in many traditional societies, they have the major burden of the care work at home. And they
mhm.
have a lot of norms of what they need to do in terms of taking care of everyone, making the food, washing the clothes, getting the water. So all of
Yeah.
that, we need to help them find ways to build, if they want to build enterprises around their lifestyle and the demands that the community already has on them. Of course, other
Mm,
people are trying to change those norms, but one way to help change those norms is that to have access to finance to prove that they can actually earn extra income, and perhaps their time could also be used on other things than just care work. So I think there's never one way to solve all these problems, but to us, one way is helping to have financial access, meaning to have more freedom to dream and to build and to figure out a lifestyle that works for them and their aspirations.
yes, I totally agree with that because at the end of the day, money for anyone, regardless of man, woman, age, nationality, status, money at the end, in my view, it's that it's a tool that enables you to create the life that you want to create, and you can dream and then just like use that as an enabler. So it's kind of unfair that some of us have access to that enabler while others don't even have a bank account. Not even credit, just a bank account.
For sure. Like to save, I heard someone the other day, I think they were a startup in Nigeria. They said just to save, the women have to essentially give up 3% of their savings just to save because their cost to keeping the money safe and all of that, right? So they actually have to pay a fee and not earn interest, like let alone that, but they
Oh,
have to pay a fee to save. So you can imagine how hard it is to actually provide good service and to have access to good financial services that many in the world take for granted.
yes. And I think that's the key point. Like, we take it for granted. Like, and even things like going to school, like we take that for granted. But in some places, well, if access to a bank is not the norm, then it makes me wonder what else is not the norm for those 2 billion people. And probably that opens up to a very wide range of topics and social problems.
Absolutely. And, again, we can't solve everything at once,
No.
but we can solve a small corner of it using the way we know best and what we do. And that actually relates to a personal story when I was a kid. We moved to Canada when I was 4. And I remember my parents, because they had to build up their credit scores all over again, essentially, they weren't able to get a loan to start their businesses. So, my parents are both civil engineers, actually, but their education qualifications were not recognized at that time in a new country. And so they had to work below minimum wage jobs just to get by until I remember they got a loan and they were able to start a company and they were able to use their skills again. So to me, that just represents everything, right? Like you have people who are willing to start businesses, people who are eager to make a better life for themselves, but just because they cannot prove themselves within a new system, it means that they have much less ways to use their full skills to their full extent. So I think that's super important in terms of making sure that we find ways to give people opportunities to really grow and to use their skills to the full extent.
Mm, that's beautiful. If we come back to you and your journey, What like well, I don't know what's been like your experience as two female founders. Yeah, can you share anything about that? Have you faced any different treatment, positive or negative? Like, yeah, what's been your experience?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question, and
Well, that says a lot on its own.
already. Yeah. Um, I mean, I think it's it's definitely has its really highs and really lows, right? We are two female founders, so we tend to stand out, especially in an industry that is very often um, male dominated. So there are a lot of people who also really want to be on our side. So they want to come and
Yeah.
help, mentors such as yourself, and also in competitions, like people would pay extra attention essentially. So that's really lovely. But on the other hand, like um, there's definitely still bias, and we face, whether it's microaggressions or outright aggressions, like
Oh,
we hear that. Sometimes we face that, and I'm thinking of one particular incident when my co-founder recently went out to even just simply getting some new computers and tablets for the company. Like, she had a hard time with the shopkeeper there because they just couldn't believe that she was coming and buying so many things. And they just thought she was like a new employee, and she also looks really young. I think that's part of it. So
yeah.
they just thought she was an employee and couldn't make decisions, and she had a hard time even just buying the things, even though we had the money to go and buy it, right? Like, so very simple things like that. I remember when we got incorporated, our lawyer wouldn't believe that we were running a business. So he
Oh,
kept saying we should register as an NGO. Um, and my co-founder, Sonica, she spent, I think, 2 hours sitting there just like convincing him and like telling him again and again, we have a business model, like this is how we're going to scale, this is how we're going to do it. And in the end, after the 2 hours, he's like, oh yeah, this is actually really needed. But I really believe if we were two men walking in there, that wouldn't have happened. It would
yes.
have been 30 minutes and the discussion would have been
Just to
done.
go through the facts. Yes, that is absolutely mind blowing. It's like I would never imagine that happening. Like
No,
as simple as getting incorporated and then being challenged by the lawyer who's helping you that you've hired
yeah.
to do the job, kind of like challenging why. That is like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. Like, to me, from the perspective of a foreigner, I guess, in that situation, I was like, why? We just, you took this business. Why are you trying to change what we're trying to tell you? But Sonica took it all in stride, and I think it's because she's like so used to dealing with this. Um, she
Oh.
has worked in tech for a very long time in Nepal, and one of the first female tech, like really people who push forward the sector. So yeah, I really I really think that she has gained so much skills in that because of it. And I mean, for me, I'm more used to being like the only female in the room or the only person that looks a little bit different in the room. I've definitely been in a lot of meetings where like the whole round table is like male bosses and male counterparts,
Mm.
and it's just me. But to start again in terms of like being a small entrepreneur and having to convince everyone to believe you is really another level.
Wow. Like, I have so many questions about you and your mindset and your emotions. That is not easy. What, like, when you're in those meeting rooms, like with only men and you're the only woman in the room, and you mentioned that you do feel different, as in you acknowledge that you're like, oh, I'm the only one here. What's your mindset to deal with that? Because I think many women, we don't need to be building a company like you as in being a founder, but since the beginning of my career in the banking industry, I felt that many times. So I think this is a very relevant topic for many women.
Absolutely. And I would love to hear your stories. I can just imagine. But I think my mindset also comes a lot from my upbringing. Since I moved around so much and was kind of a chameleon between different cultures, I would say. I I've always kind of thrived at being the misfit in the room, I would say, which is a bit of
Mm.
a strange word, but I actually really love that word because I personally think it's misfits that bring new perspectives to the world, right? So I call it the power of misfits, of being the
The power of
minority in the
misfits.
exactly.
I absolutely love it. Like, love it. The power of misfits.
I
Being the
love it.
minority in the room or the different one in the room. Like, absolutely love it.
Thank you. That's
And
actually
you
the
know
first
what
time
is,
I've said that out loud to someone, but
oh, it's amazing. Thank you for trusting me. Like, it is so interesting that you say that because, like, that's how I deal with it as well. Like, of course, I'm like, sometimes I tell to myself or others, like, I'm Mexican woman, and it's not about being a Mexican woman. It's I have a very bubbly and warm personality, and that and the banking industry, it's just different, right? And then in the UK, I would work with male British men with a more of a dry, like stereotype type of personality, and then here I come like, oh, Mexican woman bubbly, woohoo! And then it was until maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It was not that long ago that I made that change in mindset. And it was while I was in Malaysia that it was not just that I was the only one in the room, let's say, compared to the UK, but I was in a different continent altogether, like clash of culture, different religion, like it was so different, like so different to what I was used to. Working style, like everything was so different. And I was struggling a lot with that at the beginning. And at some point, I reached out to one of my mentors, and through a conversation with him, I kind of realized that being different was the thing that made me add value. So my difference makes me unique, and that's why I add value. And it's the same thing that you're saying, that it's like the power of misfit. I didn't
yeah.
know other people thought like that.
It's so nice to hear like your experience also because that's exactly what I'm describing, right? It's that difference, it's that different perspective, it's those different strengths and it makes you stand out also, right? So it's that power and you might feel like a misfit fit, but it's about how to change that into a position of power to me.
Mm,
And it's an ongoing journey, like it's a change in
yeah.
mindset for me, as you mentioned, like talking to your mentor, like it's also taken me a long time to allow myself essentially not to try to fit in but to use those differences as strengths.
Oh wow. How? I'm like, how did you do that?
Oh. I mean, I'm not
That's a
saying I
difficult
achieved
question.
it.
That's a difficult question.
It's a difficult question. I
How are
mean,
you
I haven't
trying to do that?
yeah, well, how am I trying to do that, I guess is a better better
Yeah,
phrasing.
that's a better question.
Um, but I think there's many things. Like for example, right now, I mean, even in the past, I've mostly worked in places where I don't speak the language there. And
Mm,
so when I'm doing field work, I'm often reliant on translations, or most of the time, actually, I'm just observing. And I actually find that
mm,
really brilliant because without the language and understanding what people are saying, I can really look at expressions. I can look at where they're
yes.
putting their hands and their gestures and try to infer things that way. And then afterwards, I can confirm with my colleagues that I actually understood what was going on. But I found that initially it would seem like really quite a disadvantage, right? But I actually find that it's an advantage at the end because it helps me really um, focus on understanding the person who is speaking without their words and understanding their body language. So that's a very small example in how something that to me seems like a complete disadvantage could be turned into an advantage.
That's beautiful. And like you say, it's a journey. It's an ongoing thing. It's not like, oh, now I know how to do it. No, it's
Yeah.
situational. It's like there's so many things involved.
Yeah, it's definitely ongoing, and I think we all have a lot of powers and strengths that we don't realize actually. And when we don't realize them, when we don't verbalize and name them, they actually have less power. So part of it is also focusing on naming and finding those strengths that you have within you, and then remembering to use them the next time, and remembering to use them as strengths.
Like that is so powerful. I'm like every person in the planet should listen to that.
I remember once I was talking to a mentor also, right? And um, he's like, "Oh, so would you describe your personality?" And one thing that I came up with at that time, I was having a really hard time at work, and so I was like, "I'm just stubborn, and that's causing a lot of
Mm,
trouble." And
mm.
my mentor was like, "Well, the other way to explain what stubborn is just determined."
Determined. Yeah, that's what came to my mind. I'm like, no, you were determined.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, basically describing the same thing, but from a very different angle. All right. And I always remember that. So, this kind of reframing I try to do when I can, like when I have negative kind of thoughts running through my mind, or negative feelings about what's happening right now, I would try to slow down and reframe them and asking what's really happening. Is it actually this negative way I'm looking at this, or is there a positive way we can look at this?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important, like reframing. Because I also saw in your LinkedIn that you're also a coach. You've done some coaching work as well. So it's like, and I found that very interesting that it's like many entrepreneurs are also into coaching. And it makes me wonder the relationship between mindset, managing emotions, and being able to run a business. Probably the relationship is super high because reframing is so important.
That's absolutely right. And reframing is what I learned through my coach. So I'm not a coach myself. I would love to become one day.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate, and I encourage everyone to apply to this program. It's available to women everywhere, especially for women in impact. And they're called
Mm.
the Coaching Fellowship. And they
Yeah.
provide very professional coaching at a very discounted price. And I honestly would not have survived COVID and the first few years of our startup without going through that process with my coach, because there are so
Yes.
many things that I think were barriers I set up for myself. And through
Mm.
coaching, you find ways to reframe them, you find ways to look at
Yeah.
them differently, and also to really start believing in your own ability and power. And I think that's what sets apart coaching and mentoring, right? The coach, their job is to help you realize like what you have within you is already enough, and how do you build that and let that out.
Yes, that is beautiful. And I agree with you. Like, especially now that you touch COVID, like same COVID and being in startup tech, fintech industry, many times I'm like, well, I've been able to do what I've been able to do because I have a background in coaching and I hire coaches. That's it. Otherwise, I could have given up a very long time ago.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's
I
amazing
guess.
that yeah. So do you coach people?
Yes, I kind of like stopped coaching when I joined my first fintech just because it was a lot. But before that, I was coaching. Especially, I like working with women mainly. So I was coaching women back then in London. Then joined the first fintech, and I stopped. Then moved to Malaysia, and I stopped. But then, as part of COVID, and me going a little bit like about to go crazy, was like I need to reconnect with my passions. And one of my passions is like body, mind, spirit, like all that connection and personal development. So I was like, oh, maybe I should like start this again. So now I've been doing a mix of kind of mentoring, coaching, pro bono, and eventually that will evolve into something. But yeah,
Wow,
it's
that's
just
so
like to
wonderful to
reconnect
hear.
to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
been good,
yeah.
and it's fascinating to speak with these ladies. Like most of the ladies that I'm working with, actually, they work in fintech. All of the ages, all the degrees, disciplines, like, and it's fascinating to see the challenges that they face when they are 23 years old. And then they look at me and they say, "Is it going to be like this forever?" I'm like, yes, that's why we need to do the work and change.
Yes. That's why,
Yes,
it will not be like that if we change it now in 20 years.
exactly. Like, actually, that's such a good point. Like, I had a guest in the podcast like a few weeks ago, and she's a lady that used to work in banking. She's now retired, and when she told me her story, she ended up in banking because that's what her dad decided for her many, like, like 40, 50 years ago. She did not have a choice. Like, her dad found a job for her, and that's what she had to do. And I was like, oh wow, I cannot even imagine a world where my dad decides for me which career I should go for or not. And that made me think, oh, that is so powerful. It's good that those ladies back then, they did the work to change the world, basically. And then it's up to our generation. When I think of my niece, I have a 5 month um, old niece, and I'm like, in like 30 years, when she's like a proper grown up working, she should not have to worry about like all the issues in the workplace and gender gap, like pay gap, all those things should be like part of the past. So hopefully in 20, 30 years, things will change.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I really hope so. Like I think, I've noticed a noticeable shift even within the last 10 years, right? So I really hope that momentum will just keep growing, and that it would really change. But I really believe in that. I think part of when I more identified as a social activist, that is part of it. And I believe like I have a lot of privileges in life, but a lot of
Hmm.
it was fought for by other people. I think back to
Yes.
my grandmother. Like all of my grandparents, they were refugees like after a war, and they came to a new place to start their life completely. Like I think my grandma was 14 and she had like shoes on her and nothing else. Like she came to Hong Kong during the war, and she's illiterate, but somehow she managed to build a life for her 9 children even after her husband passed away. And I still remember she mentioned like, oh, part of it was really helpful because I started a savings club. So she learned how to start a savings club, and together essentially with other families and mainly women, they would save up and then they would lend it out to one member at a time. It's the very very common revolving savings club, and that was partly how she got through and was able to build her new life. And I often think about that. I'm like, wow, if grandma can do that at that time, we can make life better for a lot of people,
Yes,
to the future.
definitely. De- Definitely. So that's such a powerful kind of background as well. What if you think like mm, 10, 20 years from now, what do you want your legacy to be? As in, yeah, in the past, not legacy, but in the past 10 or 20 years, I made a difference because of ABCD, especially if you are a social activist. There must be a lot of very interesting thinking in there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love the world to be very, very different and for the better, of course. But I think more specifically, that is actually why I had a lot of determination to start Alloy, because I really
Mm.
wanted to take what I learned in the 10 years working in development, and channeling it into something that I really think could change fundamentally how we do financing, especially for people who are not currently financially included. So I think my legacy is I would just want to see a lot, like millions, and the millions level of smiles from women entrepreneurs, who are able to really build up their own businesses and really build vibrant grassroots economies. So that is what I would love to see in 20 years, partially related to the efforts we have at Alloy.
Yes. Oh, that is such a beautiful vision and legacy. And the beauty is that there's like so many people contributing now towards that vision, which
Yeah.
makes it more feasible.
Absolutely. Like we cannot do this alone, actually. I really don't think we can change the world and make it better on our by ourselves. But I really believe in using the best of what we know, and doing the part that we can do best. And I guess part of it is finding what do we best know and which part can we do best.
Mm, yes, it's a yeah. Actually, that's very good advice. Like, yeah,
Yeah, I was
which part
listening
do we
to
know? Where can we contribute? Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to this other podcast actually, and they asked people to think at the intersection of three things, like what do you love, what are you good at doing, and where do you want to make the most impact? And I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what we each need to find in order to really, for your niece in 20 years, what would the world become?
Yes, and that's such a good trio of questions because if we what do you love, if we don't love what we do, eventually with all the challenges, everybody has like setbacks, every business has setbacks, so and it's hard work most of the times. So it's like if you don't really love it, then like why are you doing this in the first place? It's like torture. So it's
Yeah,
important to bring that to the conversation, like you love it, you're good at it, and impact, rather than there's another framework that it's like do what you love, what you're good at, what the market needs, and that the market will pay for.
right.
And I
Exactly.
love that in your framework, like what the market needs and the what the market will pay for has been reframed into what you love, your skill sets, and the biggest impact. Because if it has impact, then people need it. And then eventually you could have the financial rewards as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's it's very key, I think, because a lot of people think impact and profits can't go together, right? And I think the generation of social entrepreneurs are trying to say no, actually, those 2 billion are still customers. They still live, they still participate in the economy, even if they're financially excluded. So how do we help them participate more in the economy in a way that suits them and services them, but at the same time also see them as like really valuable clients? And it's a hard, it's a hard question. I'm not saying it's something easy to figure out, but if we don't figure out these questions, then we will never be able to find models that service them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It all starts with the thinking, questioning ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. So it's like we've gone a lot into the detail of the mindset. I love that. And like problems that we can face. What are the what what are the highlights of doing what you do? Like what gives you like that satisfaction? Because it's both, right? Like you have the challenges and the mindset and the growth, but there's something deep inside that you're like, I wake up because of this. I do this work because of this. And that keeps you going. What is that thing for you?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, just seeing our team grow is super exciting. But I think the thing that makes our whole team the most excited is when we're actually being able to help women entrepreneurs get loans, and to get loans that they generally would not have been able to otherwise. An example is one of our products works in this very unique electric bus sector in Kathmandu. It's actually a very old sector. So Nepal was one of the green pioneers 25, 30 years ago when they built this fleet of 700 electric buses. But some of these buses, because of the newer technologies, especially for lithium ion batteries, it's just beyond their ability to buy it because it's beyond the limit of what microfinances would fund. So very recently, we were able to help uh, start a new loan that is very low interest in partnership with a larger bank, to give out these loans for the lithium ion batteries at very reduced interest rates digitally. So that was a day of celebration. We were just like after months and months of working towards to it, right? Being able to see that, and truly finding a way to help people such as these women entrepreneurs be able to continue their business. Actually, it's super interesting because they've been driving these buses and they've been buying the old style lead acid batteries. So they are actually really good entrepreneurs. We know they're able to repay these loans, but somehow it was so hard for them to get financing that was beyond the bracket of what's allowed for microfinances. So yeah, like we found this like unique opportunity in the market, and worked hard to try to make the connections, and in the end it really resulted in something I think has a lot of impact, not just for the women, not just for business, but also for the air and for the environment, and really, really amazing, to celebrate for as a team that day.
Awesome. Oh, and you just touched like a beautiful word that I like a lot. Celebrate. Like celebration is so important. What's the role of celebration in building a company?
That's a really good question. I've never been asked that before. I think it's so key. I remember one thing very distinctly when Sonika and I were in Silicon Valley and during that course where we met. Um, One of the companies decided to end during the incubator program. And then they brought out like all the food and music and celebrated that failure. And they were like, yeah, like we should celebrate failure also because it means that you made movement. And even though the results were negative, you still learned and you made that movement, right? You tried. And I think that is like something that really stuck in my mind. Like I always heard that Silicon Valley, oh, celebrate failure, but like actually seeing that and being there, like really changed the mindset about what is worth celebrating. And I think that's something that every organization, not just company, should be asking, and every person should be asking, like what you should be celebrating in your life. Like I think now I'm trying to celebrate like when I'm feeling uncomfortable and I have to go on stage and do some new thing, right? But like I'm celebrating that uncomfortableness because it means I'm growing as a person. So I we hope to really bring that within our team also to celebrate all of that.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love, like, most of the times I focus on celebrating the micro actions that I call them, right? It's like, oh, today I did this. It's like, yeah, 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 that was good. But I hadn't stopped to think about celebrating the failures. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's a real
because
change
then
in
that means
mindset.
that
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm
And
like,
I
yeah,
mean it's
thank you,
yeah.
Coach Tiffany.
Oh no, no, no. I mean, it's something I'm trying to do because it's hard to erase so many years of training since you were a kid, right? You're taught what is to celebrate and what not, right? But
Yes.
it's very hard to erase that training and those automatic habits and ways that we've done things. So it really is like every day I have to think about, okay, what did I learn today and what can I celebrate? And I think that's a constant process.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you are on learning in addition to learning?
Oh, that's such a good question. Coach Monica. Oh, what am I unlearning? So, I mean, I obviously have a lot of bad habits. I also have a failed startup. Let's call it what it is, right? When on my first startup in Tanzania. So I exited after 2 years, and not like the buyout kind of exits. I just left the company, and to me, at the time, it really felt like a failure. So I spent a lot of time digesting that experience, and more I'm seeing it. If it weren't for that, I never would be here today. I never would have started another company. I never would have known like what are the common things when starting a new company. And I think because of that, I had to unlearn a lot of my old habits. And then to my thanks to my coach also, like a lot of reflection in terms of what are my habits and are these good things that I want to keep, and maybe if it's not, then I need to learn to go around them, because I think we all come with certain personalities. I'm actually a very detailed oriented person, and that it has really good things and really bad things. And so, I have to try to take the good and not to do the bad so much, to unlearn the bad side of it.
Yeah, I'm like, that's very wise. Yes. And it's like, yeah, we can learn from every failure, because of that failure, it gave us lessons to be smarter the next time.
Yes, absolutely. I
Yeah.
really, really believe that. When they say you have to be at your third startup, like the first two are just like just trials. It's your third style startup that's going to take off, and I'm like, oh, should I count the
I'm
pivot
like,
as my second startup, or can I not
yes,
count
yes,
that?
please. You're like, really? Three? It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's so
Oh,
much work.
wow. Yeah. Oh, I've never heard that before, but it's like the third one. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who
Oh,
said it. Maybe it's
yeah,
not actually true. Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. Oh, I have a personal question, I guess, like from my side, as in founder. What made you become a founder, and what's the difference? Like one of my mentors when I first joined FinTech, he was like, "You don't have to be the founder and the CEO to be an entrepreneur." And then it's like, and part of me, it's like, oh, do I ever want to be a founder? And I'm like, well, if I have to do all that fundraising stuff, probably not. Who knows, right? But it's like, what the 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 responsibility that comes with being a founder is huge. What made you like take the leap and then just be like, yeah, I'm going to be a founder rather than I'm going to join another CEO to build this, which is different.
Yeah, it's very different. I've also never been asked that question. I think to me it wasn't so much a choice because I think the seed of alloy had been like rumbling around my brain for so long that I just felt like I had to try it out. Like I really believed
Mm.
in the idea, and I really felt like we just had to do a pilot to prove it. And so there wasn't much choice because it was the idea that was driving it, and there was no other company I could find that I could join that was doing similar things. So yeah, it kind of by default you had to be the person who started it. And I don't know even if I thought of myself as a founder, that specific word. It was just like I have to start this and I have to go and try it out. So yeah.
Oh, that is so beautiful because probably it was just you started a project at some point and then it continued to evolve into an amazing company that is today, rather than I'm going to set myself to become the largest fintech.
I mean, we still want that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
but
yes, yes.
yeah. I mean, I think initially I was just like, oh, if I can just convince someone to give me like a consultancy to try this, that would be great. Like, like I think at one point
Oh,
I thought about that, but then I realized, you haven't built the tech, you haven't proven anything, no one's going to give you that. So I was just like, okay, then we'll start and build the tech and do a small pilot, like, and then that's how it started.
that's amazing. That's amazing. And that is kind of like inspiring for everyone listening that it's like, yeah, you don't have to get started with the bigger plan. It's okay, cool. Where can I start?
Yeah, and I really believe in that. Like, if you have a passion, if you have an idea rattling around your head that won't leave you alone, start where you are. Like entrepreneur, right? Like, go where you want to go, regardless of what resources you have. So, yeah,
Yeah.
start where you are. Do it after work. Do it, on the weekends, or find people who might be able to work with you, and find organizations to partner with. It doesn't mean you have to start a company. I really think that's a choice. But you can always start your idea.
I love that. Like, you don't have to start a company, but yes, you can start your idea,
Yes.
get it moving.
Just get it moving. Like if you made one step this week, that's a success. And you might want to turn it full time. Like that's a really big big commitment. And as you say, like raising funds is not easy. Managing something to start from scratch is not easy. But that's not the only format we can make things happen in the world. So once you start, I think those different ways will just like automatically show them to you, and you can choose the one that you want the most.
Yes. Oh, that's such beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's been like lovely having a chat with you. As we reach towards the end, which other final remarks could you have for the ladies listening?
I can't wait to meet you. I would love to hear your stories. I want to be inspired by you, and especially women in fintech and women everywhere in general. I think it's our time now. So
Yes.
yeah, let's do it and let's make the world, in 20 years really lovely for Monica's niece and everyone else.
Yes, for the baby. Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you in the show. Ladies, do re-listen. There were like absolute golden nuggets in there. Just re-listen and find something that resonates with you today, and just like play with that idea. In the meantime, like enjoy, have a lovely week, and I'll speak with you all again next week. Thank you, Tiffany, and ladies, see you next week. Bye.